Late November 1950. 5 months have passed since the Communist North invaded the South, and now the Korean War appears to be nearing its end. United Nations forces, led by General Douglas MacArthur, are driving north towards the Yalu River. The South Korean capital, Seoul, has been recaptured. The North Korean capital, Pyongyang, has fallen, and US commanders believe the war could soon be over. But reports are growing of Chinese troops crossing the border in force, intervening to prevent North Korea's collapse. MacArthur dismisses them. He is wrong. Far to the northeast, in the rugged mountains of North Korea, the 1st Marine Division and US Army units of 10th Corps are advancing toward a remote mountain lake, the Chosin Reservoir, also known as Lake Changjin. The terrain is brutal, the roads precarious, and temperatures are already well below freezing. What they don't know is that over 100,000 Chinese troops are already in place and waiting to encircle them. One of the most brutal defensive actions in modern military history is about to begin. The Chosin Reservoir lies deep within the Rangrim Mountains of North Korea, nestled in South Hamgyong Province. It is mountainous, with some of its more aggressive peaks rising to 1,500 to 1,600 meters above sea level, though most of the terrain through which 10th Corps must advance hugs elevations between 1,100 and 1,200 meters. Rugged ridgelines and narrow valleys create formidable natural obstacles and high ground that dominate the single road connecting Hungnam to the reservoir. Compounding the natural hazards, a Siberian cold front brought about by a high-pressure anticyclone descended in mid-November, dragging temperatures into the -30°C range, bringing snow and blistering cold winds. At these low temperatures, the waters of the lake are frozen solid, and frostbite is a constant threat. Even morphine syrettes freeze solid and must be warmed in medics' mouths before they can be injected. The Chosin campaign unfolds during a critical phase of the Korean War, following the amphibious landing at Wonsan in late October. 10th Corps is driving northwest towards the Yalu River, part of MacArthur's broader push to end the war by Christmas. The goal is to collapse what remains of North Korean resistance and reach the Chinese border before the weather or enemy reinforcements can interfere. A single mountain road leads west from the Chosin Reservoir. If properly secured, it would offer a direct link to the 8th Army sector advancing from Pyongyang. The Taebaek Mountains have kept the two UN thrusts isolated since moving north of the Pyongyang-Wonsan axis, so now the 1st Marine Division is tasked with pushing through to create that link. But the Chinese are already moving to counter it. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir forms part of Chinese Commander Peng Dehuai's wider third phase offensive, a campaign designed not to repel but to destroy UN forces outright. Their strategy is based on encirclement and infiltration, surround isolated units, bypass strongpoints, and collapse enemy resistance from within. In the Chosin sector, their operational goal is clear: the total annihilation of UN forces inside the reservoir. United Nations forces are stretched thin along the mountainous terrain surrounding the Chosin Reservoir. On the western side, the 5th and 7th Marine Regiments hold Udam-ni, with elements of the 7th, Fox, Charlie and Bravo companies positioned along the road to Sinhung-ni to keep open the narrow lifeline to the south. Further down that route, the 3rd Battalion of the 1st Marines is dug in at Hagaruri, with the 2nd Battalion stationed at Kotori and the 1st Battalion guarding the southern approach at Sinhung-ni. East of the reservoir, the 31st Regimental Combat Team is deployed and preparing to attack to the north. Its main combat elements, namely the 57th Field Artillery Battalion, the 3rd Battalion of the 31st Infantry, and the 1st Battalion of the 32nd Infantry, are deployed along the frozen water's eastern edge. Opposing them, Chinese forces under the 9th Army Group, commanded by General Song Shi-lun, have successfully infiltrated the hills surrounding the reservoir without being seriously detected. The 80th Division positions itself to the northeast of the reservoir to strike the isolated units of the 31st Regimental Combat Team. The 89th and 79th Divisions will move to envelop Udam-ni from the west and north, while the 59th Division will advance on the Udam-ni-Singhung-ni road, aiming to sever the Marines' retreat route. South of this, the 58th Division approaches Hagaruri from the west, preparing to encircle the crucial logistics hub. Further south still, the 60th Division moves towards Kotori to cut the final artery leading out of the Chosin Basin. The Chinese offensive begins in force on the night of November 27th. At Udamni, the 5th and 7th Marine Regiments face heavy assaults from the 79th and 89th Divisions. Chinese tactics mirror those used in the West. Small, fast-moving units infiltrate weak points in the line, aiming to bypass defenses and collapse the front from the rear. But the Marines are prepared. With tighter spacing between units, mutual support is immediate. When the Chinese penetrate the line, adjacent platoons pivot to flank the defenders, funneling them into crossfires and killing zones. The result is a tactical reversal: heavy Chinese casualties, local Marine counterattacks, and no breakthrough. As daylight returns on the 28th, the attacks intensify. The Marines hold their ground, but the cost is significant. By afternoon, some companies report over 80% casualties before relief can reach them. Further south, the 1st Marine Regiment fights along the southern road out of the reservoir. At Hagaruri, the 3rd Battalion anticipates the direction of attack, southwest, where the 58th Division is approaching through the mountains. The Marines deploy most of their force forward of the town, shielding a critical asset, an airstrip under rush construction. The plan is clear: wounded must be evacuated by air before any breakout attempt can begin. Chinese infiltration groups begin probing Marine lines overnight on the 28th and escalate into direct attacks by morning. Before the 28th concludes, though, Douglas MacArthur hosts a conference with 8th Army Commander Walton Walker and 10th Corps Commander Ned Almond in Tokyo. The scale of Chinese intervention by now is finally being understood, and 8th Army are being hammered to the west just as hard as the Marines are in the reservoir. The decision is made to withdraw, and 10th Corps begins a process of gathering its forces around Hamhung and Hungnam. Extricating the Marines from their predicament, though, is going to be tough. The reservoir is difficult to navigate, and there's only one real route that leads south, the same way they came in. With 6 Chinese divisions in the area, their best chance will be to concentrate what they've got in one place, and then try to push out as a unit. Hagaruri seems to be the only place to accomplish this, sitting on the southern edge of the lake. From there, it's a straight shot towards Kotori, Chinhungni, and safety. But getting everyone to Hagaruri will be a tall order. The 5th and 7th Marines will need to make it there without reinforcements on the ground, carrying their wounded in tow. The 31st Regimental Combat Team faces the prospect of either having to punch through the PVA 80th Division or move across the frozen lake in the open. Even if everyone can make it to Hagaruri, the route south is narrow, full of valleys, and more importantly, Chinese troops. But first, Hagaruri must be reinforced somehow, because should it fall in the meantime, then every UN soldier west, north, and east of it is as good as dead or captured. To achieve this, at Kotori, Task Force Drysdale forms under British Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Drysdale, composed of 235 Royal Marines and over 600 American troops. The force is ordered to break through to Hagaruri. The Chinese 60th Division controls the road and will be difficult to pass by. At 09:30 on November 29th, the column moves north. Royal Marines lead the way, advancing 2 kilometers before meeting heavy resistance. By noon, they are stalled. In response, General Chestipullah releases 2 tank platoons to reinforce the advance. These arrive around 1400, pushing the column forward once more, but by 1615, progress remains slow, just 6 kilometers covered in nearly 7 hours. That night, the column enters a narrow valley where the Chinese launch a coordinated ambush. A truck near the center of the column is destroyed and set ablaze, blocking the road and splitting the force in 2. Under fire and unable to regroup, most of the American infantry at the rear withdraw south. The Royal Marines and leading US Marine elements press on, fighting through the night. Some 40 Marines trapped in the valley are forced to surrender by morning. Drysdale, wounded, leads the survivors northward. Though under constant attack on the 30th, the battered task force finally reaches Hagaruri late in the day. The escape route remains precarious, but viable. While the Marines fight to hold their sector at Udamni, the situation east of the reservoir deteriorates rapidly. Colonel Alan McLean, commanding the 31st Regimental Combat Team, believes reinforcements are en route, specifically the 2nd Battalion of the 31st Infantry, but it has not, and ultimately never will, enter the reservoir. He also expects support from the 31st Tank Company, which remains at Hudongni to the south. On the morning of November 28th, a relief column forms under Brigadier General Henry Hodes. It includes a tank company, an anti-tank platoon, engineers, and elements of Regimental HQ. Pushing north from Hudongni, the armored force quickly encounters a strong Chinese roadblock held by units of the 80th Division, reinforced by the 242nd Regiment of the 81st. In the exchange, 2 tanks are knocked out, the attempt fails, and the remaining vehicles are ordered to fall back to Hagaruri. The same day, Maclean orders the 1st Battalion of the 32nd Infantry Regiment to withdraw south under heavy air cover. The battalion successfully reaches the main regimental combat team positions, but it is clear that the perimeter is now fully encircled. On November 29th, Maclean spots what he believes is his long-awaited relief force arriving from the south. He moves forward to link up, only to be shot and captured by Chinese troops. Command passes to Lieutenant Colonel Don Faith. For the next 2 days, the remnants of the 31st Regimental Combat Team hold their ground in brutal frozen conditions. Chinese assaults continue without pause. Air support and airdrop supplies stave off total collapse, but casualties on both sides are immense. By December 1st, with no relief possible and Hagaruri their only hope of escape, Faith orders a breakout. The survivors form a convoy and attempt to punch south through successive Chinese roadblocks. Chinese forces launch ambushes along the route. Faith is wounded by grenade shrapnel but remains in command. Then, during a renewed attack, he is hit again and killed. With their senior officers lost and the column disintegrating under fire, order breaks down. What remains of the task force abandons the road and sprints across a frozen reservoir, seeking the shortest path to Marine lines. Many are gunned down on the ice before the Chinese troops realize their enemy is beaten and hold their fire. Only a fraction make it to Hagaruri, frostbitten, wounded, and nearly out of ammunition. The 31st Regimental Combat Team has ceased to exist as a fighting force. Also on December 1st, over in the western sector, the 5th and 7th Marine Regiments begin their breakout from Udam-ni. Their perimeter, now contracted, is tightly organized and all equipment that cannot be carried is destroyed. At 0900, the main column begins moving east along the road to Hagaruri. Smaller detachments advance cross-country, securing high ground and clearing Chinese positions from the hills and ridgelines that threaten the withdrawal route. Temperatures along this route are observed locally at around -27 degrees Celsius. But with consistent air support, the Marines make steady progress. From Hagaruri, a separate relief column composed of the 3rd Battalion and British commandos supported by armour pushes northwest out of Hagaruri to meet them. The link-up is successful later that day, but casualties are high. By nightfall, the majority of surviving UN forces of the ill-fated Chosin expedition, including elements of the shattered 31st Regimental Combat Team, have reached Hagaruri. There, engineers complete just enough of the makeshift airstrip southwest of the town to allow a C-47 to land. The first evacuations begin. Over the next 4 days, more than 4,300 wounded are flown out, and 500 reinforcements are flown in. A full aerial evacuation is proposed. Major General O.P. Smith, commanding the 1st Marine Division from Hagaruri, refuses. An airlift might save the men, but not their equipment. Smith insists on bringing out the division's gear, knowing that abandoning it would weaken future operations in Korea. The order to resume the withdrawal is issued on December 5th. The following morning, the first units move out of Hagaruri, aiming for Kotori. Resistance is stiff at first. Fresh Chinese forces of the 26th Army, specifically the 76th and 77th Divisions, which have recently joined the fight, open fire with mortars and small arms. But air cover, artillery support, and tanks at the front of the column keep momentum steady. South of the narrow valley where Task Force Drysdale was ambushed, Chinese resistance wanes. By the end of December 7th, the Marines reached Kotori, having suffered around 600 casualties, just over 100 of them fatal, during the march from Hagaruri. From there, the 1st Marine Division links up with Chesty Puller's 1st Marines and continues to push south towards Chinhung-ni. They are now entering the US 3rd Infantry Division sector. Elements of the 3rd Division, supported by an attached Marine Battalion, launch a northward thrust from Chinhung-ni to seize the high ground above the road. Chinese resistance, mainly from the 60th and 89th Divisions, is heavy, but airstrikes and artillery suppress most opposition. By December 10th, the Marines are within striking distance of Chinhung-ni. They will arrive tomorrow, and the nightmare of frozen Chosin will finally conclude. 10th Corps has withdrawn, battered but still alive, and heads to the port city of Hungnam. The retreat has been costly. Of the roughly 2,500 men in Regimental Combat Team 31, only about 1,000 reach Hagaruri. Fewer than 400 were still combat capable. The 5th and 7th Marine Regiments suffered 1,500 casualties during the breakout from Udam-ni alone. The push from Hagaru to Kotori and beyond cost nearly 2,500 more, including 1,400 frostbite cases. Task Force Drysdale lost a third of its men and most of its vehicles. In all, the 1st Marine Division took around 4,500 battle casualties and over 7,000 non-combat casualties, primarily from the bitter cold. But Chinese losses were far higher. Estimates range up to 50,000 casualties, the majority from frostbite and exposure. At Hagaruri alone, UN forces claimed 1,500 Chinese dead in a single assault. Soldiers' estimates are always likely to be on the high side, but what's certain is that Chinese forces paid heavily for their tactical success. Strategically, the battle was a clear Chinese victory. 10th Corps was forced to abandon its drive to the Yalu. The link between East and West Korea was never established. Further west, the 8th Army is in retreat, its own front collapsing under Chinese pressure. Yet the Chinese objective at Chosin was not delay or territory acquisition. It was the destruction of their enemy. That objective failed. 10th Corps escaped. The 8th Army survived. Now, the UN forces will pull back to the south, brutally bloodied but not beaten. Pyongyang will soon be recaptured by Chinese forces, who will push all the way to Seoul. There, UN forces will mount another defense, aiming to blunt the Chinese armies and reverse the momentum once more. To find out what happens next, check out our Korean War channel, where we cover the events of the fighting week by week. The link to that channel is in the video description. Thank you for watching our latest installment of TimeGhost Cartographic. If you enjoy our work and want to see us make more, consider joining the TimeGhost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com/TimeGhost History. All the best from us at TimeGhost, and we will see you next time.